two heads are better than one, working with a partner. So we're going to talk about how do we work with our partners. Because public forum debate, just like a lot of other forms of debate, basically Lincoln Douglas is the only style of debate that's one-on-one. Most debates that you're going to have in real life, you're going to be with other people who are part of the debate. Even if you're in a classroom having a debate, there's a good chance that you're going to be debating on a certain side where other people in the class agree with you. And so then you're going to be having to work together. And maybe that's less formal than the way we're going to work together in our debate rounds, but you're still working together with other people. So we're going to talk about how do you work seamlessly with your partner? How do you make sure that the arguments that you're making, the arguments that your partner are making actually come together and work? So let's talk about the very first thing. So the very first section is the value of a partner. Partners are valuable. Partners are valuable, first of all, because they help keep one another accountable. They help keep one another accountable. This way, Devontae can say, hey, Alan, have you taken care of getting the case written? Because I've been working on researching our con case. You've got our pro case. So you do those sort of things. And so holding each other accountable, rather than your coach being the only one who's asking you whether or not you're getting things done, your partner can be there to ask those same kinds of questions. Also, your partner will help lighten the workload. Lighten the workload. The amount of work that you're going to have to do if you have a partner is going to be less, because each of you is going to split up the amount of work that you have to do. You're going to get more things done in less time, because there's two of you instead of just one of you.
Well.
And finally, the different communication styles means that you're going to have different strengths and different weaknesses from the different people on each team, right? So that's going to help, because one person is going to communicate with an audience in one way, and another person is going to communicate with the audience in a different way. And these two people working together are going to end up being able to persuade better. So when we're in our spring fling round, one of you might do a better job of persuading certain members of the audience, and the other one will do a better job persuading different members of the audience. Another good thing about having partners is that you can bounce ideas off of one another, and so that's going to help you as you try to think about the arguments you make. So you know how we just outlined these arguments, and we were able to think through, okay, we have these two arguments, but maybe this one's stronger than this one. You can do that with your partner. You don't have to just do it by yourself, and that's very valuable. What are the speaker roles and the speaker order? We know in a public forum debate round that we have 4 speeches for each team. We have 2 crossfires by yourself and then the grand crossfire, right? And so how do you use those things to your advantage? So one of the things you need to think about with your partner is, what are your roles in the debate round? First role is who's going to cover what issues? Who's going to cover what issues? Who's going to be on defense? Who's going to attack the other team? Who's going to ask the questions of trying to probe into the weaknesses of the other side's case? Who's going to ask the questions that are trying to strengthen your own case? So for example, maybe you would decide that Alan is going to be getting up in his speech and his goal is going to be to attack the con case. Whereas Devontae is going to get up and he is going to try to protect and argue in favor of the pro case. And so you're going to do both of those things, but the primary goal, well, possibly. And so you're trying to figure out what is the primary goal of your individual speech, and you're going to split those things up and figure out who's going to cover what issues. Also, you need to decide who's going to be the good and the bad cop. Who's going to be the good and the bad cop? You've seen the TV shows, right, where you've got the interrogation happening. The police officers arrest somebody and they put him in this chair, and there's 2 police officers, and one of them is like banging on the table and making loud noises and screaming in the person's face and saying like, you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life, and then the other one comes in and relaxing and really nice and calm.
I'm going to answer some real simple questions. I want some real simple.
Exactly. You want to think about who's going to play these roles. Who's going to be the more aggressive of the two of you? Who's going to be a little more laid back? Because some judges, some audience members are going to be more prone to listen to the person who's being really aggressive and outright in the forefront. And other judges are probably going to think, I'm a little less persuaded by that and might want the nicer conversation. And so thinking about who is going to play which role is going to help you think about that before you start the round. And that's going to be able to persuade one audience member better than the other.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you want to think about is who's more technical versus who's more of a speaker. So if somebody's really into the details, then that's going to be, that person is going to be maybe less persuasive to somebody who's just looking for, is this person giving a good speech? Because even a really well-delivered speech that's on a very technical subject is going to be less persuasive than kind of the flowery language. And so think about a speech that a politician gives in a presidential campaign. They don't talk about all these tiny details of the budget, right? They aren't saying, well, we're going to spend $60 on this part of the budget and $7 on this part of the budget, because that's, even if it's a really good speaker, that's not going to be persuasive and interesting. Instead, you think about who's the speaker versus who's the technical person. And both of you need to work together to decide who that's going to be and how you're going to use that to better persuade your audience in a round. So finally, not only do you need to decide who's going to be the technical versus who's the speaker, you need to think about who's more of the salesperson on your team. The details person is going to speak first, and the salesperson is going to speak second.
Oh, right now?
Salesperson, this is the person who is going to be able to just connect with their audience really well at the very end of the round. Who's going to be able to get up and look into the judge's eye and say, look, here's 2 reasons you just have to vote with us. And that's the person who could sell, you know, a $5 bag of groceries to somebody for $50. That's the person. That salesperson, that's the person you want to speak second.
Wow.
Whereas the details person, the person who's going to talk about all the finer points, why aren't there enough organs out there? That's the person you want speaking first, because those big picture ideas those big details need to come out before you narrow it down to here's a couple reasons to vote for our side. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. These are all pre-round decisions. You aren't making these decisions in the middle of the round. You don't decide, hey, you cover these issues, I'm going to cover these issues, or you be good cop, I be bad cop in the middle of the round. You have to make those decisions before you walk into the round. You want to try out both. So some rounds you want to say, well, I'm going to play good cop, you're going to play bad cop. And then maybe the next round you switch. And try to figure out, how are we more effective at persuading judges? How are we more effective at getting the other team to admit the things we want them to admit? And so you're evaluating that throughout the debate tournament, throughout every round you ever debate. Finally, we want to talk about how to communicate. How do you communicate with your partner in the debate round? The first thing you need to do is have pre-round good communication, because good communication has to begin before the round even starts. You and your partner have to have most of the conversations about how are we going to, who's going to speak when, who's going to be technical, who's going to be details oriented, who's going to get out there and give the flowery speech, who's going to be good cop and bad cop, who's going to ask the probing questions, who's going to ask the defensive questions. All those kinds of decisions need to happen before the round starts. So the most important preparation that you and your partner do is before the round ever happens. And so this means that you and your partner getting together all the time, talking to each other on the phone, emailing back and forth with each other and saying, here's what I think we should do when we have this sort of situation come up. So that's the communication that's going to happen before the round. Second is you have communication during prep time. In public forum debate, you only have 2 minutes of prep time though. And because prep time is limited, the only thing you're really doing in prep time is making sure that you're on the same page. Make sure that you and your partner are still going in the same direction. So if one of you started veering off a path that the other wasn't anticipating, you need to talk about that and make sure you decide whether we're going to keep going down that path or whether we're going to pull back to the way we thought we were going to go. And those decisions have to happen during prep time because it's so limited, you don't have enough time to have big strategy discussions. It has to be these short little snippets of conversations to get you on the same page. During the round, you can only have basically nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication with your partner. You're going to encourage one another, and you want to coordinate during crossfire. Remember how we talked about putting your hand on the front of the desk while your partner was speaking during a crossfire to kind of indicate to your partner that you wanted to ask the next question, that you wanted to interrupt them? That was a way that we talked about having nonverbal communication where you and your partner were able to talk to each other without saying anything. Right?
Yeah.
And last, we were going to talk about how do you communicate with your partner after the round, so post-round, where you want to review what went well. What went well between you and your partner? How did your strategy work out? What arguments do we think the judge bought? What arguments do we think were best able to poke holes in our opponent's case? We also want to talk about what can be improved. What are the things that you and I could do as partners to make sure that in the next round we don't make the mistakes we just made? One final thing about communication with your partner is you're communicating with your partner, but you're also communicating with the judge throughout the round. And this is especially important when your partner's up there speaking. When your partner starts speaking, it's really tempting because you already know what they're going to say to start kind of wandering around and letting your mind wander. But you have to make sure you stay focused on what your partner's talking about. Keep on flowing so that the judge considers the arguments your partner's making to be important enough that you, even as their partner, who already knows what they're talking about, are willing to listen. And so if you as a partner are willing to listen, then me as an audience member is going to be just that much more willing to listen to the arguments being made. So you obviously want to have respect enough for your partner that you're paying attention to when they're speaking, because they're up there speaking and saying important things that benefit you and your team. Last, let's talk about how do we pick partners. Now, generally your coach is going to assign you a partner, right? You're not going to get to decide who your partner is. But here are some things that you could consider if you're talking to your coach about how to you pick a partner, or if you get an opportunity to just select your own partner. 1 minute.
Oh, those guys sound so scary.
I'll be done in 1 second. The first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what are your strengths. What are your strengths? What are your strengths? And so you evaluate your strengths, and you try to think about what are strengths that would complement my strengths. And so if you're somebody who is really good at taking a lot of information, lots and lots of research, and boiling it down into one little piece, then that might be the kind of person you want to be. But so think about what your strengths are and try to complement those strengths. So here's a few examples of complementary strengths. So you might have a big ideas person along with a detail person. So somebody who just takes broad ideas and somebody who thinks very carefully about small details. You might have a researcher and an argument developer. So somebody who really likes to get on the computer and just find loads and loads of evidence, and then somebody who's really good at reading evidence that somebody else has already cut out and putting that evidence into set arguments. Another thing is the speaker thinker. So you have somebody who thinks a lot about the topic, and then somebody who's a really good eloquent speaker but maybe isn't thinking as much about the topic. And so being able to put those things together, those are good partnerships. One thing to keep in mind is you want to work with your coach, work with parents, work with your other teammates, your captain, all of those people to try to think about what are going to be the best ways for me to come together with somebody where we're going to be the most effective in the debate round. So that's kind of how working with a partner is going to happen in a public forum round, and we'll get to practice this as we go through debate rounds throughout the year.